damn it to hell, Steve. Here we are. Steve, we're back. We're back for another exciting episode of the Chinwag. Steve.
Indeed, sir.
It's such a pleasure to see your shining face as always.
My shining face.
And to hear your dulcet tones and to be safe and sound with you again, talking about insane, bizarre things. And we will be speaking with a wonderful science fiction writer named Nnedi Okorafor. But first, I want to welcome you back, loyal listeners, and thank you for joining us as always, and remind you to take a little trip down to over to Apple Podcast if you'd care to, and leave a review.
Some of you guys are regular listeners and viewers of our fine animation on YouTube and so forth, but at Apple, you need to go down and basically review us and rank us and give us some thumbs up. It's very helpful to us, and we really appreciate it. Yeah,
give us some love. I'm an actor. I'm a narcissist. I need love. I need to know people love me. So go and just tell me that you love me. That's all I need to know.
You are like a combination. You are a nihilist who also needs love at all times.
Wow, that's fucked up. That's sad and true. The nihilist who needed love. That's my memoir title.
Is that a Shel Silverstein book?
Right, The Giving Tree. The nihilist is The Giving Tree Shel. It's not Shel Silverstein.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it is.
The nihilist who needed love, Shel Silverstein. Fantastic. But indeed, we are going to be speaking very soon with a wonderful science fiction writer, Nnedi Okorafor. She's fantastic. She's our guest today. She's the award-winning author of Who Fears Death, her Binti novella trilogy, among many other fine and wonderful works of science fiction and fantasy. She's won many, many awards, the Hugo, the Nebula, the World Fantasy Award, and more. She also has written for Marvel, the Black Panther.
Oh, I love the Black Panther.
Yeah, right? And so she's been carrying on that fine tradition. So she's wonderful and witty and smart and imaginative. We are ecstatic that she's here. Welcome, Nnedi Okorafor. Hi, Nnedi. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome here. Welcome to our little show here.
Well, I know we're going to talk about, a lot of interesting stuff. African futurism is something we're very interested in hearing about. And Paul and I have read your stuff, and we're big fans of your work. And you and I met in Texas a few years ago at a Monsters conference. And so maybe we'll talk a little bit about monsters, but what I want to ask you right off the bat is, I want to know, why are dogs so much cooler than cats?
You really want to go there.
Opening gambit. I do. I always want to. This is an important question that I want to hear the answer to.
First of all, it's wrong. And second of all of them are cool. All of the dogs and cats and all creatures of the earth are special. They are all people, all
That's
earthly.
a nice disclaimer. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
But
I heard you're a cat person.
I'm very much a cat person. But I love dogs, too. I love dogs. I'm fascinated by all of the creatures that love human beings. You know, that's a big deal. We're not very lovable. So any creatures that love being around us and that are kind enough to give us their time and joy are wonderful to me. But yeah, I'm a cat person, and but that does not mean I don't like dogs. Two different issues. Yes, exactly. Two separate issues.
Do you like birds? Have you ever had a bird as a pet or anything like that?
I love birds.
I
love birds. Yeah. Growing up, we had parakeets, of course. Lots of kids have parakeets, but I had doves.
Wow.
Ring-necked doves, 4 of them, and they had an enormous cage. I just liked weird animals, so my initial goal was a quail, and the quail was sold at the pet store.
Wait a minute. Now, a quail.
How's that a goal?
Quail, no. That's a fascinating goal. People sell quails in pet stores?
They did. Yes,
they did.
They had one at the pet store.
Wait a minute. Where was this that they were selling? Where were they selling quails in pet stores?
It was at a pet store in Illinois, and this was like in the late 80s. So I don't know if pet stores have changed.
All bets were
bit.
off in the late 80s. It was
right. Yeah, I don't know. It seemed like it, but I had these doves. I had 4 of them, and I knew nothing about doves when I got them. I knew nothing. I just knew they were like these plump, cute birds, and I fell in love with them as soon as I saw them. And what I didn't know, and I always remember this, is that, so I had them in my room, in this humongous cage in my room, which really is not a good idea because doves are dirty. It's dirty.
Yeah. That must have been a really big cage because
it was big.
Because doves are going to want to really flap around and stuff,
yes,
aren't
and
they?
slap each other and all.
Yes, exactly.
Like peaceful bird. They're like the symbol of peace, but they're not peaceful. But that's another thing. But like I didn't know that they laughed.
Oh,
I didn't know that they were the kind that laughed. So one day I was sleeping and I just heard something go,
oh boy.
Really?
I kid you not. You can look it up. You can hear the laughing. And I thought there was a troll in my room because I have a very big imagination. Like, what the hell? But like, yeah, my brother and I, we had this connection with these doves and they're singing. They love singing and
That's
all of their ways.
fascinating.
And I love those doves.
I know that I'm awoken most mornings in Brooklyn, New York to the sound of the incredible cooing of pigeons outside the window. That is just fascinating. But it's interesting because you've already made clear that you feel great kind of compassion and connection to animals.
Yeah.
But they're not birds, like, they're not a quail and a dove. Are they giving you a lot back the way like a parrot does? Or
I don't think cats are either.
Well, hold on, Steve. Hold on. We're still on birds.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that you shouldn't have a pet quail and whatever, but it's like, are you cuddling up with a quail? And like, it's not really,
It's like, it's not about that though. It's like, so cats and dogs and certain other creatures are very loving towards human beings, but other creatures are not. They don't, they don't do that. And birds don't, I hear parrots are a different everything, but like, my doves, they didn't do that. And I wasn't looking for that from them. Like I wasn't like looking for them to give me love. It was more just their existence and their shenanigans and their lives and their presence. Their shenanigans.
But also probably to some extent the sheer like aesthetic pleasure of their beautiful looking creatures.
Birds are beautiful.
They are.
Yeah.
They
are.
And
particularly doves. Doves are really beautiful.
I knew the guy who, his name is Jaak Panksepp, and he was the scientist who figured out that rats laugh. He tickled rats, and then you couldn't hear them with your ear, but they were laughing at a certain frequency. And he discovered that all mammals, and I wonder if birds would be, included, even though they're vertebrates, not mammals, they have a play system where they enjoy laughing. It releases all this endorphins in them. And they learn how to do it in rough and tumble play, like when they're little, like when animals are wrestling with each other.
Yeah.
And then they bond really well with humans. This is what we do too. Like human beings do this play as well.
That is fascinating.
That is super fascinating.
The idea of other animals laughing and that endorphin release and what does that mean? How can they figure out that rats laugh? I guess.
I know. And also this guy got a grant to do this. This guy had a grant to like sit around tickling mice. But that is really cool. But it's also, it brings up the whole question of what is the point? What is the function of laughter anyway? Yeah. I mean, like, why are we laughing? Are we showing some sort of, I don't know, comradeship? Are we showing that we're willing to be?
Why did it evolve? Why did laughing evolve? Or is it evolved?
It's like, sometimes it's not controlled though. Like it's sometimes, have you ever been in have you ever been in the situation where it's like you're not supposed to laugh? Yeah. It is not a funny place and the laughter comes. It's church. Funerals are like, that weird reaction you sometimes have if somebody tells you someone's died and you kind of laugh. It's bizarre. It's
bizarre. Really strange. So that is an interesting function of it that I hadn't connected. Cats certainly to me seem like they do not laugh. I cannot actually go with the idea that cats are laughing at all.
They're chuckling at you. They're not laughing with
snide.
you. Yeah, they're
I
snide.
think they snicker. I think they snicker.
Maybe
Definitely.
some cats laugh. I don't think the cat that I currently have laughs a lot, but he's pretty serious fellow.
He's chill.
Well, amazing. Thank you for thank you for diving into that hard-hitting question. But I think, Steve, we wanted to get talking about Afrofuturism as opposed to African futurism, and knowing the differences between these things, which are, I confess, before reading your stuff, I did not know there was a difference between them.
Yeah. There's a difference, and okay. So first of all, African futurism is a term that I coined, and I coined it because I knew that it's not that I need to like go around naming things. I'm very concerned with conversations, because the concept of naming something does bring it into existence. Naming is a powerful thing, because once you name something, people can understand what that thing is. It's like before you name it, the concepts were there, but like it was less defined. So once you name something, it becomes something. So I knew a conversation needed to be had when it came to Afrofuturism, and because there were aspects of it that were left out. Like there were aspects that were left out.
And which, by the way, Afrofuturism being a sort of term to describe what exactly?
And this is okay. So Afrofuturism.
I think of like space is the place. Sun Ra, that's what associations in my head. And you're trying to break from those associations, I guess.
Yeah. And the definitions of Afrofuturism have been very, very broad. And that was part of my issue too, because I'm like, okay, so generally, I hate defining Afro because someone will be like, no, that's not what it is.
No, it's true.
I'm going to get this wrong. This wrong, so deal with that. I know it's wrong. What I'm saying is wrong. Good. But if I were to boil it way down, Afrofuturism is American-centered, Black American-centered science fiction. Okay, but the definitions include fantasy, it includes everything, and I don't know why. It doesn't make sense to me, and I don't agree with that. I'm like, I don't know why you're putting science fiction and fantasy. They can be mixed. They can easily be combined. They manifest in different. I mean, look at the stuff that I write. But like, but there is a such thing as science fiction. There's such thing as fantasy, and if you have the word futurism in the word, I don't think fantasy needs to be in there. Like so that. So if we're really boiling it down, Afrofuturism is African American science fiction. And so this definition was being applied to everybody, like all people of African, like all writers, stories of science fiction narratives of African descent, and then also fantasy, just everything. And in doing that, it was causing a phenomena that I felt was problematic. It was centering the United States, like centering narratives of the United States, where everything else was kind of a secondary thought. And I'm like, no, that's not right. I'm Nigerian American. I mean, it's way clear for me that that's not right. So the term African futurism, it's similar to Afrofuturism in the ways of like that Black people of the continent and Blacks of the diaspora are connected by blood and spirit and history and future, but it's different in that African futurism is rooted in African culture, history, mythology, point of view. It does not necessarily have to have anything to do with the United States or the West.
And it seems to me, some of the Afrofuturist, an idea that seems a part of Afrofuturism seems to be some idea of return to repatriation, return to something, which doesn't necessarily seem like it's a part of African futurism.
Right.
Necessarily.
And not necessarily. It could be, but not necessarily. It is not not by definition. And that has to do with Afrofuturism is African American, and that is part of the narrative here. It's a different narrative in other parts of the world. There are different narratives of people of African descent in other parts of the world. There are many different. That's one of the reasons why this is so important to me because I think people were forgetting that. Also, one of the big differences, like Afrofuturism tends to be really interested in what could have been and alternative history, like going back and then saying like, well, if this hadn't happened, well, this could have. And so African futurism is not not central to anything. It's more concerned with what is and then can and will be. You know, and that's a very it's nuanced, it's subtle, but it's big. It's a big
difference.
Can I ask you, is there something about like because I've been reading your stuff, there's an appreciation of like what I would call like indigenous technologies in your work. Like, so you've got like the kind of sci-fi stuff that you would expect, computers and we're going to space and stuff. But then there's also this kind of appreciation for, like in your own case, like I guess like the clay of Nigeria or something becomes like a protagonist in the storyline. And is that common in African futurism to have these kind of indigenous technologies as part of it, or is that just you?
I think it's definitely me. That's something I've always been. That's one of the reasons why I write science fiction. It's like the foundation of like when I started writing science fiction narratives. That was why, because I wanted to see those technologies that sprung up from the land, from the people specifically, as opposed to taking and adopting technologies from elsewhere. So that's core for me. But when I look at the definition of African futurism, that would be core to the concept of African futurism. That we're looking at the indigenous and what can, and then extrapolating and speculating from that.
Are you talking to some extent about kind of technologies like folkloric technologies, almost like magic and things like that as well? Or is that shaded into like something else, fantasy? You know what I mean? It's like
there's going to be like, and that's another thing about African futurism. The mystical are part of it, because that's part of the point of view. If we're talking about an African point of view, and we know that Africa is not a country, it is a huge continent first, but generally that idea of the mystical and the mundane coexisting is it's an African point of view. That's normal. That is normal. That is it's reality. It's not magical. Right. It's reality. So if you take people who think like that already and then have them speculate about the future, that's what's you're gonna get those mystical connections.
It's really cool. But also there's such a sort of, like a kind of basic idea in science fiction is this idea that at some point the technological, and this isn't very Western oriented, it's the technological becomes the magical at a certain point. And it's like, but you're already positing somewhere, you're going to a place and a people and a culture, different cultures and different traditions where that's already the case. Yes. You don't even need to be like developing the computers to the point where they seem magical at a certain point. You're already there. That's really cool.
Yeah, when I was living in Southeast Asia, there's some similarities in the sense that you have a very magic tolerant, and that's not even the right word, it's a magic embracing culture. Within science is sort of like there's syncretism between Christianity and animism. There's syncretism between scientific views and these magical views, like in Vietnam and Cambodia. And in Sri Lanka, there's a lot of I think Arthur C. Clarke ended up living in Sri Lanka for the latter part of his life. And there's this weird mix of science literacy, but also like heavy Buddhism and heavy magical traditions too. And I'm just guessing there's some similarity like this in Nigeria, maybe. I don't know. What's been
definitely?
Your experience?
I mean, I think that I think there's similarity in most of the world.
Yeah, right.
I feel
it's just here.
I feel like this is the minority. Actually, yes. I think that so that I'm fascinated by that the marriage of technology and the mystical. It just makes so much sense, and I think that if we move down the line with that, the things that we can create. Well, and the way that we approach them,
right, yeah,
will be different.
The way
will be less problematic.
Yeah, that's what seems almost more important, is that it's
Yeah,
the way
I
we
agree.
will relate to it and the way we will utilize it. That would be better. Yeah.
Isn't it?
We'll be right back. And now, back to the show.
This is something interesting, and I don't know. I think it's because I'm sitting. Where are you, actually? Are you?
I'm in Phoenix.
Oh, okay. Phoenix.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
It's hot.
because right now, I'm in New York City right now. And I don't know if you know what's happening in New York City, which is crazy fires are happening.
Yes.
From
And
Canada?
it's like,
Oh,
thanks, Canada. Thanks once again, Canada.
Fucking Canada.
Goddamn Canada. So this is crazy. And, it's a very unusual event for New York City. It's very strange. And it's very apocalyptic looking.
Isn't it?
And I was wondering about it, and it's interesting to me, the whole notion of, I'm going a little bit off, a little bit left here. Sorry. It's like, I'm like the kinds of concepts of apocalypse and end times and end of the world kind of narratives. Do they exist in African culture so much? Or is there not? Because it seems like it's so related to a Christian Western thing. But even I think in Hinduism, there's some idea that things will end, but then they'll start again. I think there's this idea that everything ends and starts again over and over again, that there isn't this final end, which seems to be, and I just don't know. I'm not familiar at all with a lot of the traditions we could talk about here, but is there a kind of sense of like things will end ever in any of those traditions?
In my research, which is of course limited because Africa is humongous and the cultures and the mythologies and all that, no human being can contain that all in their heads.
Yeah.
But it's something that I'm interested in learning different spiritual beliefs and all of that. So in my research, I have not come across that end of the world, like everything is going to end. No, I never thought of that.
I never thought of that either. That's really interesting.
No, I'm just curious. It just doesn't, and obviously it's connected to a lot of Christian and that kind of thing. But even other traditions, like in Norse mythology, pre-Christian, it's like the world's going to end.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, and in a lot of these,
interesting.
But I don't feel like in non-Western cultures, I've always been interested that there doesn't seem to be this notion that it's all going to fucking end.
Right.
That it's like, that it's all, and I just think it's great. Actually, I like it.
Yes.
That there isn't this sort of like, everything.
Like in Buddhism, there's also, this is missing. Like it's not an important part of the spiritual tradition. Like you're supposed to focus on the here and now. One time, I know they asked Confucius about do you think there's an afterlife and are you going to live on? And he was like, I can't even get it together here, like in this lifetime. Like how the hell would I know? Like I can't focus on that at all.
In cultures where the mystical and the mundane coexist, there can be no end, really.
Right. Were you raised in any kind of religious tradition?
Yeah, I was raised and let's accentuate the word raised Catholic. My parents, both of my parents, it's a fun experience. Both of my parents, they're Nigerian and they were born and raised in Nigeria, and they're Igbo, and the Igbo people, with British colonization came Christianity. And with Igbos, the Christianity was also associated with education, and Igbos are big on education. Like you have a PhD, you get as many. If you meet a Nigerian who has like 5 PhDs, it's going to be an Igbo person, and it's just they love their degrees. They love their degrees, and so that was always associated with Christianity, and so I just have beef, and I've had beef with. I will say this because I've never said it publicly, but
get it off your chest.
Beef.
Yeah, do it here. Do it here.
Okay. I do have beef with Christianity. It's on a personal level though, because it's like, I was raised Catholic, and I'm one to ask questions. I was fascinated by all of it, and I love reading. So Bible, all of that stuff. There's a text and everything, so I'm reading that stuff, and I'm like, so I had questions. And I would get yelled. They didn't like me having questions. But even before all of that, both my mom in particular, both of my parents were super smart. They were like always the top of their class, like valedictorians, and they were also super athletic. So they were top athletes and most intelligent, just
Man,
they were,
Jesus.
yeah, there was
with
a
like
lot of
seven
pressure.
with like 7 PhDs and
Exactly.
like Jesus Christ.
Yes. So I come from like these high-powered parents, but so my mom was the top of her class, and then this known athlete. She was she made the Olympic team in the javelin. She was like that.
Whoa.
She was known,
Cool.
and so the nuns who were like, "Oh, you're so smart," and everything. What they saw when they saw this woman, this Nigerian woman who was the smartest and the most athletic, so physical and mental, all just perfect. What they wanted to do was try to make her a nun. They wanted to recruit her to become so I wouldn't have existed if Christianity had its way. So I've always had beef with that.
Can you imagine?
Personal.
And also she
Personal.
would, well, I will say this, it would have been cool if the one nun who could really just like
throw a
javelin would just be like,
yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
Just taking down
why take her out of the gene pool? Like,
Totally.
Of all people, why take her out? So I've had beef from the start. And that was something like my mom would tell these stories. She was so flattered and all that. But I was listening and I'm just like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
I don't like
and so that stayed
yeah.
with me. And so, yeah.
There is a kind of culture that because I grew up Catholic too, where they don't know what to do with you because this was an older time, like for my generation. And they were like, well, he's kind of intellectual. He reads books, like you were saying. And they were just like, well, he'd make a good priest. They didn't know what else to do with the guy, so then they take you to meet some priest or something.
He can figure out how many angels dance on the head of a pin. That guy, he's the guy to answer all these vexing questions we have. Yeah, that's so bizarre. Can I ask about what was your sort of, I'm just curious because I'm a science fiction fan and I'm always curious about, because I like meeting science fiction writers is an honor, but also meeting fans and how you got into science fiction. Like what was the journey for your science fiction interest and stuff?
Yeah, my journey was weird. It was weird because it wasn't, I grew up reading the classics and that inspired me to do what I'm doing now. It was not that at all. Actually, I grew up, I read a lot. That was the one thing that was the only hint that I would be doing what I'm doing today was that I loved reading. Books were just like candy. They were candy. The library was like a candy store to me. I would come out with just tons of, and I love candy, so it's a proper comparison.
And where was that? Was that in Chicago? Is that where you?
This was in South Holland, Illinois. That was my first library. So it's the south suburbs of Chicago.
Awesome.
So I read a lot of books, and I read everything. I've never paid attention to categories. I just don't like, I would go into the library. I wouldn't even look at the labels. I just go in there and whatever I'd find is what I'd find. And so I would read everything. I would read, if it had a good story, whether it was nonfiction, whether it was fiction, it could be mystery, it could be fantasy, it could be whatever. I would read it and enjoy it. But science fiction didn't appeal to me. I remember I wanted to read it. I would see the little spaceship sticker on the, I'm like, oh, this should be good. But every time I'd start reading it, it just felt it felt like the worlds that were presented. My library was very limited. It didn't have a very diverse selection at all. And but this was in the 80s. I don't think there was much in terms of diverse science fiction.
Yeah. No, I don't think there was. No.
Yeah. So I would try to read these stories and something in me sensed that these were narratives that not only, I didn't need characters to look like me. I don't need characters in the narrative to look like me for me to relate. That's not a problem I've ever had. But what I do have a problem with, and it was intuitive. It wasn't something I was conscious of at the age of 8, 9, and 10. It's worlds where I could not exist. So these narratives, it's like I'm like, this reads. I can tell I wouldn't even be a thought in this world. And that's not a world that I wanted to dwell in. I just naturally didn't. So so that kind of made me not read a lot of science fiction. Also, when I did read it, I looked for books that were where the main characters were not human. I related more to the aliens. I related more to the creatures.
Sure.
You know, I loved that. I just
Outsiders?
felt more comfortable. Yeah. But like non-human, specifically non-human, because they didn't have the issues that human beings had. This is me looking back on it. I didn't know that this was what I was doing, but this is so I didn't grow up reading a lot of science fiction. But once I started writing, the first things that I started writing kind of late, in my opinion, when I was 20. You know, there's a whole story behind how I started writing.
Writing at all, you mean, like really sort of consciously sitting down saying,
writing fiction, like where it's me making up the story.
Right.
I had never thought. Both of my parents were doctors. It's like it's not something. And I was all about the bugs and the catching grasshoppers and classifying and
becoming a nun.
not becoming a nun.
Not becoming a nun. Yeah.
But like, so I didn't. That never crossed my mind to actually make up the story. It wasn't even in my orbit.
Interesting.
But what led me to write science fiction? So once I started writing, first things I started writing were like it was just playing in the playground of my Igbo culture, because it's like once I started writing, I realized, I could do anything I want in these stories, and nobody's going to yell at me. Nobody's going to judge me. So I started writing about all the forbidden stuff, because there are all these forbidden things whenever we would visit, where they're like, we don't talk about that. That's evil.
Right.
You know, that you're a heathen. We need to take you to church because you shouldn't even be asking about that. So I was fascinated by those things. So once I started writing about those forbidden things. And then as I got older, I started noticing technology showing up. And it started with the cell phones. Cell phones showing up in the village, like, because half of the trip would be in the city in Lagos, and then the other half would be in the southeast, which were very almost rural areas.
And this is you going back to Nigeria, visiting in Nigeria and seeing the encroachment of, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was fascinated. And I was seeing this because cell phones are portable. They are, you charge them so they can be anywhere. And then once you have your cell phone, you have access to the world. So you've got these cell phones just invading these very rural parts of Nigeria. And I was seeing it happen. And I was like, that's so cool. And like, I would see like the palm wine tappers climbing up the tree, something that I've seen how many times to tap the sap in the palm tree. And then they have their cell phone when they're up there.
That's
and I'm
so
like,
awesome.
this is so cool.
It
So
is awesome.
once I realized that, I knew I wanted to read. I'm like, okay, what is the future going to be like here? Like, what is it going to be like? Because there's the infrastructure, the electricity and plumbing and all that is lacking. But then you have this super advanced piece of tech here.
Yeah.
What is this place going to be like in the future?
What a completely insane dichotomy. Yeah.
It seriously is. But no one was writing about it. No one. Like, it was just, I had to, and that was why I started writing.
And now a message from our sponsor. And we're back with more Chinwag.
I noticed I'm a huge fan of comic books. I grew up on comic books and graphic novels. And I know you've written for like Black Panther. And there's a sense in which I think the role of imagery is really important, like in comics and graphic novels. But the kind of like the literati dismisses this stuff still as well.
Yes,
that's not literature,
Yes.
Do you experience that?
Yeah, that's also a reason why I don't think science fiction was a thing back in the day. That's one of the things, because that was something I encountered only a few years ago. I mean, my first novel was published in 2005, and I remember the way that Nigerians talked about what I was writing. Like they didn't know how, like they kept calling it fairy tales. They kept calling it folklore, like just like child, like basic. And I'm like, you don't even know, like you don't know. And I do think that my Nigerian Americanness has played a role in the boldness with which I write science fiction. It's like, it's definitely that distance, because there is a snobbery there. There's a great snobbery there where that's from not real literature.
In Nigeria saying this was this is low rent stuff.
Yes. It almost sounded like academia.
Yeah.
Academia
there's a lot in academia
a few decades
too.
ago.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I dealt with, dealt with a lot of that in academia where, science fiction and fantasy and mystery writing and speculative fiction are not real literature.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. I mean, for Africans to say the science fiction is not real literature, that's deep, because science fiction is like an active and pointed and specific imagining of the future. Like that's part, not all science fiction is about the future, but that's like a big part. Yeah. And like to say that that's not real literature.
Yeah.
And the imaginative aren't real literature.
Yeah.
That feels like colonialism to me.
Oh, interesting.
That feels like the result of colonialism to me. And that's always been how
there's this idea placed on these categories of what's like real literature and what isn't real literature comes from the colonial. Sure, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was going to ask you were talking about the palm wine tapsters and all that stuff. And it makes me think of the one Nigerian writer I know of is this guy, Amos Tutuola. Do you know
Amos,
who he is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting because, I mean, it's great. And it's like, but it's funny because was that considered literature? I mean, he writes these kind of folkloric novels and they're very filled with magic and stuff. And I don't know what, I mean, I'm taking this again off into a weird tangent, but I'm just interested because he's the one Nigerian writer I had any experience with before reading your stuff. And his stuff is fantastical. And it's a lot of like, folklore and stuff like that. And I wonder how that was received back in sort of the 50s and stuff like that.
That's a really good question because I'm trying to think of another. There's the name of it is slipping my mind because there's another book. It was translated by Wole Soyinka. It had the word bush in it, something about bush, something. But it reminded me of Amos. My Life in the Bush of Ghosts.
My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. Now, just because I give people context, that's a famous book that this Nigerian writer wrote, My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, and it's it's an amazing book. It's a really cool book. But anyway, continue with what you were saying.
Yeah, I discovered both of those books, and actually Amos Tutuola is he has a whole bunch of. His most known is the Palm Wine Drinkard, but he has a whole bunch of other really weird,
really
wonderfully weird. Like, really what weird. Is this? I love it.
I'm going to check it out.
You should check it out, and anybody listening should check it out. It's very strange stuff. Yes. It's really cool.
Yes,
the folklore of it is so cool.
Oh, it's so cool.
The ghost, and this is something I want to ask you. The concept of ghosts in that book, because what happens in the book is a kid gets lost in the I can't remember why, but he runs away from home and from his village, and he gets deeper and deeper into the bush, and he goes from village to village, and it gets weirder and weirder and weirder as he gets deeper into the bush, and he goes to these different ghost towns, and each town, and I thought the concept of ghost seems totally different.
You mean in Nigerian culture?
Yeah, and I wonder if that's true. Like if ghost means something different than it. I mean, I would assume it does. But or how much of the idea of ghosts coming from Western culture get put into, I don't know. I'm just curious what the deal with ghosts is.
And do you believe in them?
Do you believe in them?
Do I? Gosh, do I believe it? Gosh, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, sorry.
Because actually, when you were bringing that up, I was like remembering, because it's been a while since I read The Palm Wine Drinkard, but
me too.
That book has like influenced a lot of what I write. As you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, that's where I got that from.
I wondered if it did. I wondered if it did because some of your stuff has this sort of, this sense of somebody journeying deeper into a strange world and encountering more and more alien things, which is very much like those books. And I wondered if that was true. I didn't want to say you were plagiarizing.
Paul is spotting your influences.
No, but I was really interested because
seriously,
because it did remind me a little bit of those books. But anyway, ghosts, getting back to ghosts. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on ghosts culturally and whether you believe in them and things like that. I've had experiences. There's one in particular that I had when it was in Nigeria, and it was in the village, and it stays with me. Would you care to share that experience?
It was okay. All right. Okay. It was weird already. And so it was I was with this was one of my many trips. I was staying with my sister, and the situation was crazy because my parents have two houses that are built in the village. And we were going to see how the houses were doing. When my sister and I arrived there, we were like, I don't know, like in our early 20s. Mm-hmm. When we arrived there, we come to find out that all the villagers had taken everything out of the house, like everything.
Whoa.
Weird.
Yeah. All that was left was one bed. All the couches, everything was gone. So we were already in the state of mind where like, I was mad. I was ready to yell at everybody. And I was yelling at everybody. I wasn't like, you don't mistreat my parents.
Absolutely.
I was yelling but we stayed we're staying in this house. This is parents' house, staying in it. So we had this one spare bed. That's what we're staying in this house. I actually wrote a story that was inspired by this. But like we stayed in the house, and I just remember it was night and it was hot and there were mosquitoes, and we stayed in that house anyway. And I was on the balcony and I was looking out at the forest, because it's like, it seems very rural there, even though it's a lot of farmland. I'm looking out at the forest, and it was hot, and there was something in something that was there was a presence that was hovering above the forest. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it was late. My sister was sleeping, and I just froze. I was just looking at it. Mm-hmm. I was just looking, and then it flew at me. Mm-hmm. It flew at me, and it flew through me, and I could hear it like that. Mm-hmm. And it flew through, and I just was. There's the writer's side of me. The writer's side.
Okay, I
gotta remember this. Right. Yeah.
That was so hard. But I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was
Did it have
terrified.
A shape?
Yeah, you could see something. You saw something.
It was like shadowy, and it was it was a presence. It was shadowy. It was dark, and it flew at me. It was huge.
Wow,
it was huge, and it flew through me, and then it flew through the house, and then out. And so it's like, and that area has always been like, and that's why I talk about that part of the world. That specific village is my father's village, where we have the two houses. That's like the core of where my inspiration comes from, like the not just inspiration, but like the energy is, because you can feel it. You can feel it there. But that was my most tangible moment, because I could hear it, I could see it, and I could feel it, and it went through the house. It went through the house, and it came from the forest. It came from the forest.
Now, do you interpret that in a certain way, or you just leave it as uninterpreted weirdness?
And that's what I mean. Like by the naming of things, it doesn't work here. I don't name it anything. Like I don't say that's a ghost, because ghost has a
baggage.
Like,
well, it does. It has a really specific thing. Yeah. But that's what's interesting about that Nigerian novel, is that ghost seems to mean a million things. It's like ghost means a guy who comes into your house and takes his head off and like puts it on the table and starts to pull his arms off, and like it's like ghost means like a weird tree creature jumping around. It was really cool that ghost seemed to not be such a specific thing in at least in that novel, from that coming out of the culture then. You know,
I think the way that I've always seen it is are the limitations of language. Like ghost is in that novel, ghost was carrying everything. Like it's just there's no word for it, so let me just put ghost on that.
That's right. That's exactly what it was like. It was like, I will encapsulate it by saying ghost. Yeah. But I thought it was a really cool thing that ghost has such expansive energy in that book. It's really cool. It's a million different things.
I wonder too, I mean, you've got more experience than the average person thinking about aliens and UFOs and tech. And now in the news, it's hotter than ever, because they maybe going to have congressional investigations and all kinds of stuff. What are you making of all the latest? And let me put it to you this way. Are we alone? That's what I want to ask you.
Oh, that question.
Yeah.
First, I'm excited about all of it. I'm like, and what I always think is, finally, it's about time. I mean, come on. But I'm I mean, statistically, we can't be alone. I mean, I think about this all the time. We can't. There are others out there, but I always think about like what we're looking for and what we expect might be the problem. Because
how so? What do you?
We're always like human beings always expect to see reflections of themselves everywhere.
Yeah,
I see.
Everything has to be like us. And that concept doesn't even make any sense because we're on this planet. This planet's very specific. Look at it compared to all the closest planets in our solar system. I mean, there's nothing like Earth. So everything on here has developed to be like everything here.
Mm-hmm.
Why would something develop like here over there? It doesn't make sense. So if we encounter extraterrestrials, why would they be like us? Why would they be like at all? Like I think about like, would we be able to see them? Will they operate on a different wavelength?
Totally.
They just completely different substance that we can't even detect with our earthly senses. So those are things that I think about all the time. I'm just I feel like we've been visited before. But the way that what we expect, I think what we expect might be getting in the way.
That makes sense. Yeah.
No, but that idea, I used to, as a kid, always be like, you'd read, Jupiter is 75% methane. It's not possible for anything to live there. And I always be like, but what about the thing that lives on methane?
Right.
But what about some creature that lives on methane?
Exactly.
I don't know. We can't even detect it. It's just an interesting thing. And I have another question for you. And it's because I think the same thing to some extent about AI, about artificial intelligence, is that this people saying, well, no, of course it's not conscious. We know it's not conscious because it doesn't do blah, 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 blah. And I keep saying, but what if something's developing? Yeah, not only what is consciousness, but what if something's developing we're not detecting about it yet? But anyway, I'm just curious your thoughts about AI in general.
Yeah.
But also,
I have lots of thoughts about AI in general. I'm trying to reel it in.
No, go.
Don't bother.
Don't reel it in. Yeah.
But like the mystical and the mundane, there's that, and you were kind of verging on it. What you were just saying. I think that is something to consider. And oh God, what do I want to say about AI though? I'm more interested in sentient AI. Like I just where
too.
It's not just a program that is used to replace people, because that conversation is tiring to me. It's utterly exhausting to me and irritating. Very, very irritating. But I like the concept of...
You're so angry about it. That's great.
I am angry about it because
the
way that when I hear people talking about it, like there's certain... When I hear non-creative people talking about using AI to create and to write novels and to make paintings and then to replace people...
Yeah.
It's very irritating to me. It's not even the concept of doing it that's irritating. It's the not understanding what creatives do, not respecting what creatives do. Like that's because like even before AI came about, this whole idea of why should I have to pay for this movie? Why should I have to pay for this book? I could just go pirate. Like that attitude has been there all this time.
That's
so
very
now
true.
It's just bloomed into this annoying conversation, that I just can't stand. So, but I prefer the conversation around sentience.
Yeah,
me too.
I'm like the guy from Google who was saying this thing is sentient, and he was fired.
Yeah,
I'm interested in that.
That's me too.
I think there's sort of a traditional view, which is that if the thing can pass the Turing test, which is have a conversation with you and you can't tell if it's a machine or a person, then we have to let it into the consciousness club. That's traditionally been the marker. But I think that's a bullshit criterion for measuring consciousness. Like, who cares if you can use language in a certain way? That's why I don't care that ChatGPT looks so amazing.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, can it feel pleasure or pain?
Can it feel?
Yeah,
Yes.
can it feel something? Yeah.
Right. And when we get to that point, how are we going to treat it? That's the part. That's
the
part.
ethics.
Like,
how are we going to
treat it?
Yeah, right. But
and what are we going to use it for?
What are we going to use it for? As
Should we be using it?
That's assuming it's not going to be
using us.
Well,
I mean, arguably, I talked to a guy once, the singularity, this whole idea of like at some point everything flips and the technology becomes the dominant, we're dominated by our technology, not the other way around. I talked to a guy once who was like, man, they invented the wheel and we were screwed. We were done. It's like, technology was ruling us already. It's like, and it's happened to some extent that we're already being ruled by them. So that's assuming it's not going to do something with us, as much as we're going to do something with it. But my concern is more that it's not even going to be something we even know what the hell it is. We're not even going to be able to, you know what I mean?
I'm kind of fascinated by that though. I kind of want that.
Me too.
Like, just the like something that we don't know. I like the idea of when I say AI, I don't consider ChatGPT AI, like artificial it's not intelligence.
Yeah, right.
So when I'm talking about AI, I mean the sentient kind, the kind that can feel, the kind that can
that's coming, maybe.
Yeah, that's coming. I think that when that happens, we're going to be forced to face some of our worst qualities.
I would think
because
so.
It's like this idea of like they shouldn't be working for us; they should be our friends. We should be trying to we should be treating them like somebody that we'd want to be friends with. And if we do, they're not slaves. See, that's
totally.
where that slippery slope is right there.
Totally. Look, I would hope that they may be able to help us. Yes. I would hope that they reach a point where they can actually fucking help us, maybe. You know what I mean? That they're actually going to be something very positive, that it's almost like we're going to create angels. You know what I mean? That it's like in artificial intelligence, we're going to create something, it's going to aid us. It's going to say, here's how you solve all your fucking problems, you idiots. Here's what you do.
But the
we
tricky
have to
thing
let
is
them get there.
Yes.
Yeah, and also
they
like you said,
be,
it's a slippery slope. Like we have these dogs, we have these cats. They are our friends in a way. They love us, but also they're subservient to us as well. You know what I mean? Like they're not our peers. So this will be a different kind of thing.
Well, I think at a certain point, cats, it's true. At a certain point, I think the AI will maybe be able to get itself there. I mean, it's like maybe in theory.
Yeah, with its boot on our neck, man. That's how it's going to go down.
It could be that, and it could look at this point. If it's going to solve people's problems, fine. It's like if it could help us, why not?
Does it have to be sinister? Does it have to be?
That's what I'm saying.
If it has its boot on our neck, that's because we've created it that way.
Exactly.
We've let it.
Yes,
because
exactly.
I just hope that we're able to just stop doing that. Like, then that's one thing that I do worry about, because anything made by human beings is going to have our flaws. It's going to have our digital DNA in it. So like, that's what I mean. We need to get it together. Like we're so focused on creating the technology, and we're not focusing on getting ourselves together, because we don't realize that is going to affect the technology that we make. At this point, like if we make a sentient AI, it's going to have those bad qualities that we have not dealt with if we don't deal with them. So like that's what I'm an irrational optimist. So it's going to be okay.
No, that's good. No,
that's good.
There is a part of me, amazingly, because I am not optimistic I'm irrational, but I'm not optimistic. But I have these funny moments of thinking to myself, what is the purpose to our consciousness? I don't fucking know. I don't know. But maybe this consciousness will actually show us why there's consciousness. Yeah. You know what I mean? Maybe this thing will develop, and you know what I mean? It's like maybe
possible.
This thing will develop into something that shows me the reason there's consciousness. Because otherwise, what the hell is the point to it?
Does there have to be a point?
Please.
That's a great response.
I know. But say more about that. Like, it doesn't have to have a point.
I don't know. I think about that a lot too. Because, like, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if we get so caught up in this idea of everything has to have a purpose, everything has to have a function, that we miss important things.
Interesting.
And like, this is just in general, this is like a general philosophy for me, because a lot of it is because of the way that my life has moved, where when I've tried to plan and when I've tried to have like where I'm like, sure, this is how things are going to go. And then things just went into disarray. And that disarray is what, like, seriously, disarray is not an understatement. But that disarray is what led me to like these awakenings that I wouldn't have arrived at. And so like it comes down to structure too, because things having a purpose is a structure.
Yeah.
It's like, it's control as well. As it gives us control where we're like, okay, we know what's going on. We know what we have to do. We may not be able to do it, but we know we got to do it. And like that letting go of that, I think may lead us into directions that we can't see until we let go.
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, in the Christian tradition, there's like, why does God make the world? If he's perfect, why make this imperfect mess? And it's always like, well, it's the purpose is it's going to be a test for all of us. But in the Hindu tradition, it's like they ask the same question, and the answer is it doesn't have a purpose. It's just a cosmic dance. Yeah. It's just a dance.
It's
that's
just
what it
this
is.
extraordinary dance.
I love that.
We've solved a lot here today.
We covered it all.
We really have.
Well done.
We have really solved a lot here. But we've also taken up a lot of your time. And
Thank you so much.
No, this
more
has been
than
great.
you intended. This was really awesome.
Really.
Thanks so much.
I enjoyed
it. Really, I love your stuff. And it's just, and it's really a pleasure to talk to you about all of this stuff. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. This has been like a really great conversation. Very fruitful and just fun. Yeah, this is fun.
Chinwag is a production of Treefort Media and Touchy Feely Films. Hosted and executive produced by Paul Giamatti and Stephen Asma. Executive producers for Treefort are Kelly Garner and Lisa Ammerman. Dan Carey is executive producer for Touchy Feely. Our series producer is Rachel Whitley Bernstein. Our associate producer is Andrew Miller. Original theme music by Luke Topp, with additional music by Via Mardot. Oscar Guido is our executive in charge of production. Tom Monahan is head of audio for Treefort. Animation created by Alex Sokol. Audio production, supervision, and editing by Maxwell Carney. Additional audio assistance and mixing by Jeff Neal, with additional production management from Renee Levesque. Clara Wong is Celestial Empress of Benevolent Knowledge. Lastly, for more information, go to chinwagpod.fm and find us on Instagram or TikTok at chinwagpod or on Twitter at chinwag_pod.